On today's show, we're going to check out the latest Deshaun Watson news and rumors, but let's be honest, it's a lot of legal mumbo-jumbo at times, so I figured we'd play a quick game of trivia to keep things light here. So, here's my question for you guys. Name the missing quarterback from the Browns' 2014 season. Brian Hoyer, Johnny Manziel, and who all started a game in 2014? We will reveal that answer at some point in today's show. Today's Cleveland Browns Report is presented to you by Aura, an all-in-one digital safety company that keeps yourself and your wallet protected while you are online. Start that 14-day free trial over at aura.com/chatsports. Proud to tell you more about their awesome services later on in today's show. But we've got a lot of ground to cover on today's show on the latest Deshaun Watson rumors and everything that's going on over there, because there's been some new rumblings and nuggets that came out of this over the last couple of days that sort of got overshadowed by, maybe you heard, the trade where Baker Mayfield went to Carolina. So I thought this would be a good topic just to quickly revisit and send you guys off into the weekend. Because yesterday, Josina Anderson dropped a couple of bombs. Now, Josie is always an interesting follow on Twitter because she doesn't know how to thread and she speaks in this cryptic language. But bear with me because I got some key takeaways from this. So here's one of 4 tweets where she said, "I'm told there's a recording of an interview with an adult son of one of 2 women in the NFL interviewed in the Deshaun Watson case, stating his mom initially was complimentary of Watson in their conversation after the massage, but later switched her account and tone after negative allegations surfaced about Watson. The son intimidated his mother, intended to reward his silence, per league source. There's a feeling that the NFL was initially cagey about details they learned from the woman's son, after only mentioning they interviewed him in their report. Their son's recording was later reviewed by Watson's side, revealing the aforementioned details, presumably illuminating why this particular accuser was not included in the 5 women the NFL ultimately focused on at the hearing. I was also told the NFL presented no evidence of violence, force, threat, or coercion in the allegations of the 5 women they focused on at the hearing before Sue Robinson, as first reported by ProFootballTalk in part." And exhale. So a lot to take away from there, and it's a long run, but to condense it for you guys, in English, essentially, this damages the credibility of the NFL's case. Because you have someone who was a part of the 24 women who accused Deshaun Watson of sexual misconduct. And now one of those 24 women's son is saying, didn't quite go down that way. And this just is a point for Watson, sort of, right? In terms of like your mental scoreboard of things working for and against him. But the question I want to ask you guys before we get into more of this, because believe me, we've got more to unpack. Are you more optimistic about the entire Watson situation as a whole right now than say you were a couple weeks ago? Because I absolutely am. So let me know, yes or no, if you're just more optimistic about the whole situation. Now, Tony Busby, the attorney representing all these women, referred to this tweet from Josina Anderson and commented back saying, "It has been reported that 12 alleged victims spoke to the NFL. I have confirmed that 10 of those women were my clients. None of my clients had a son questioned by the NFL. As I've said, there were several women who called my office wanting to sue Watson that I decided, based on my trial experience, not to represent." Busby would go on to say, "I know that at least one of those women who I declined to represent spoke to the NFL and also gave a statement to the police. I can only assume it was that woman who was the subject of the leak tweeted about by Miss Anderson," of referring to Josina Anderson there. I think the big takeaway I have from this is whether or not Josina's leak is true and what Busby is saying is 100% factual, ultimately, it doesn't matter if Judge Sue Robinson doesn't take this into account. You know what I'm saying? She is the judge, the jury, and the executioner unless the NFL appeals. So with that in mind, what do we care unless Robinson takes this into her findings and makes it a part of her decision I'm looking for on the entire Watson situation. We've got more to get to in just a second. Believe me, you guys are going to want to stick around for this. But I want to tell you about the awesome benefits that Aura, our proud sponsor today, has for the Dog Pound. So you can keep your identity secure, where Aura is going to be like a personal online watchdog for you. Make sure none of your information ever gets leaked in a data leak or gets hacked by any hacksters, because we shop, bank, work, everything we do is online this day and age, so make sure you're doing it safely and you're being protected thanks to Aura at aura.com/chatsports. Start that 14-day free trial. Links in the comments and the description of today's show. You won't want to miss it. Moving along here, an interesting tweet that I saw yesterday that I wanted to share with everyone. Matt Fontana tweeting out Jeremy Fowler on ESPN saying, "Someone I talked to this week doesn't feel like Deshaun Watson will get a full year suspension." And this is just the last blue checkmark Big J to put out a little bit of doubt over Watson getting a indefinite year-long suspension. Now, Dan Graziano, who we'll talk about in a moment, said the NFL may have offered a 12-game suspension to Watson, where he could apply to be reinstated afterwards, and it won't be this indefinite year-long suspension. It's interesting to me, all of these leaks that are coming out about the NFL doing everything they can to strike a deal with Watson before Robinson can come down and hand down her decision on if any punishment is applicable. Because that kind of seems to me the NFL isn't very confident in the case they presented to Watson to get a year-long suspension. So maybe they're trying to get the best they can before Robinson comes around and says, and we'll show you why in a second, we're not giving Watson more than a 4-game suspension, if anything. So we're going to look at that in just a moment. But we have a race going on between myself and, of course, producer Marshall, who runs our Giants Now channel here at Chat Sports, to 10,000 subscribers. Giants Now had an early lead initially. Then we had an early lead. They overtook us. We overtook them. Now they're back on top. But the race to 10K is on. Help us win. Don't do it for me. Do it for Odell Beckham Jr. in that trade that just backfired horribly. Hit that big red button and subscribe. Here's what Dan Graziano said on ESPN the other day. They weren't able to come close enough late last week. The league is still insisting, from what I've heard, what I've been told, on an indefinite suspension that would allow Watson to apply for reinstatement after a certain period of time. Now, here's the interesting part. Initially, they wanted that period to be a year, but they moved a little closer to Watson, and we're talking about, you can reapply after 12 games, for example, but Watson is still not interested in signing up for that indefinite suspension. Is the NFL shaking in their boots, right? Are they not seeing are they not getting what they're hoping will be a year-long suspension at minimum, right? Or are they now coming to a realization that what they were hoping to get from Robinson may not be coming down? And so ultimately, they're trying to brokerage a deal to Watson to get at least as many games possible so they save face, and the PR and the optics, they look good, and it's not a complete disaster like the Ray Rice 2014 lack of a punishment was back then. All right. Now, Deshaun Watson's case. Let's talk about this a little bit more in detail, because an interesting article from our friend Mike Florio at PFT came out on July 4th. So a bunch of us missed that, but I want to revisit it. I want to remind everyone, the NFL's case against Deshaun Watson did not include any violence or any threats or anything really of that nature. So keep that in mind right now as we look at the exact wording from the NFL personal conduct policy. With regards to violations of the policy that involve criminal assault or battery, not Watson, domestic violence, dating violence, child abuse, and other forms of family violence, or, also not Watson there, sexual assault involving physical force or committed against someone incapable of giving consent, a first violation will subject the violator to a baseline suspension without pay of 6 games. Deshaun Watson does not meet the criteria for any of that. So the NFL knows this. They're not pushing for him to violate the NFL personal conduct policy under sexual assault. I think that's going to be misconstrued and will be missed by a lot of people. Not you guys, because you're watching right now, but just know that Watson is not under penalty potentially for sexual assault allegations under the NFL personal conduct policy. Here's what the NFL is probably looking at. Conduct that poses a genuine danger to the safety and well-being of another person, and conduct that undermines or puts at risk the integrity of the NFL, NFL clubs, or NFL personnel. That's what the NFL is pushing Sue Robinson to hand down a big suspension for. But what about Robert Kraft? Didn't he meet that criteria right there? When he got some HJs before the AFC Championship game in Florida and then took the PJ to Kansas City? Wouldn't he get in trouble? No, he didn't. Despite the NFL admitting they did an investigation against Kraft and offered no punishment. This is what the NFLPA is throwing at Robinson and the league right now, saying you have to hold everyone accountable. If you're not going to do it to the owners, why should the players be the only ones who fall under this jurisdiction? Now that TED Talk's over, if Watson does get suspended, how long do you guys think it's going to be for? Right? I initially thought 8 games, not because I thought he was guilty of all this, but that's just the way the NFL works. But now it's different because you got a third-party arbitrator, so it's not going to be the same as Zeke and Roethlisberger. And I really hate, sidebar, all of the comparisons from Watson to Roethlisberger. Roethlisberger was accused of rape. Watson was not. Just keep that in mind. All right, Steelers fans. Now, like I said, I'm getting closer to that 4-game range than 8 earlier initially. Just, kind of the rumors and the leaks, flowing out and reading some of the tea leaves, it feels like Watson is ahead right now in the battle against the NFL. So I'm leaning more towards 4 games than where I was a couple weeks ago of 8 games. I'm never going to be in the camp of he's going to get a year-long suspension and he's never going to play football for the Cleveland Browns. Before we wrap up the show, don't worry, I did not forget about our trivia question today. Appreciate all of you guys sticking with me, though. That was a lot of some hard-hitting stuff right there. But name the missing quarterback from the 2014 season. Brian Hoyer, Johnny Manziel, and drum roll, please, Connor Shaw, South Carolina legend, right? Remember he played Week 17 against the Ravens? Wasn't that bad. Really wasn't. But that would be his only start in the NFL. Now I just checked out his Wikipedia. He's working in South Carolina football operations. So that's your Connor Shaw update that I know we're all looking for on a wonderful Friday afternoon. That's going to do it for us on today's show. We'll see you guys later with a Cleveland Browns mailbag over the weekend.